I'm Amanda, 32, the marketing executive who thought her marriage to James was picture perfect for 8 years. As I planned our anniversary celebration at La Maison, the upscale restaurant where we had our first date, I was hoping it would help us reconnect. James had been distant lately, working late most evenings, barely responding to my texts. I had no idea that night would change everything. Looking back, the signs were there, but love can make you blind to what's right in front of you. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how my wedding anniversary turned into the most shocking revelation and ultimately the most empowering moment of my life. James and I met during our junior year at Cornell University. I was studying marketing and public relations while he was pursuing finance. Our eyes locked across the university library one rainy October evening, and it sounds cliché, but it really was love at first sight. He asked if the seat across from me was taken, and we ended up talking until the library closed. By our third date, I knew he was someone special. Our courtship was a whirlwind of passionate dates, deep conversations, and building dreams together. James was charming, intelligent, and seemed completely devoted. He would leave little notes in my textbooks, surprise me with coffee during my late study sessions, and listen attentively to all my hopes and fears. Everyone in our friend group said we were relationship goals. After graduation, we both landed entry-level positions in New York City. I was at a boutique marketing firm while James started at a financial consulting company. We moved into a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn, barely affording the rent, but we were happy. Those early days were magical, despite eating ramen noodles 3 times a week and having furniture we'd found on the street. We were building something together. James proposed on our 2-year dating anniversary at that same library table where we first met. He had somehow convinced the university to let him decorate it with candles and flowers. When I said yes, people around us applauded, and it felt like the beginning of our fairy tale. Our wedding was simple but beautiful. We saved for a year to afford a small ceremony in Central Park with 50 of our closest friends and family. I wore my mother's restored wedding dress, and James looked handsome in a navy suit we had splurged on. The reception was at a friend's restaurant, and everyone danced until midnight. Those photos still sit framed in our living room, a testament to happier times. The early years of marriage were challenging but wonderful. We both worked long hours trying to climb our respective career ladders. When James decided to pursue his MBA, I supported us financially for those 2 years, picking up freelance marketing projects on weekends to make ends meet. I believed in him completely and knew the sacrifice would be worth it for our future. After he graduated with his MBA, James landed a position at Prescott Financial, a prestigious firm downtown. His salary doubled, and suddenly our financial struggles seemed behind us. We moved to a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan, started investing, and even talked about having children in the next year or 2. My own career was thriving as well. I had worked my way up to marketing director at Athena Group, managing a team of 12 people and handling some of our biggest accounts. We were the power couple we had always dreamed of becoming, or at least that's what I thought. The changes were subtle at first. About 6 months after starting at Prescott, James began working later hours. The occasional late night became regular than expected. Our dinner reservations moved from 7 to 8, then 8:30, and often he would text to cancel altogether. Big client meeting ran long, he would explain. Or market volatility in Asia means we're all hands on deck tonight. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? His career was demanding, and I wanted to be a supportive wife. When he came home smelling like perfume, once he mentioned his new executive assistant wore too much fragrance. When lipstick appeared on his collar, he explained that his colleague Susan had hugged him after he helped her with a difficult client. There were other signs too. James started going to the gym more often. buying new clothes being protective of his phone. He installed a password and would turn it face down whenever I came near. Our intimacy waned from several times a week to maybe once a month, always initiated by me. When I tried to talk about it, he blamed work stress and promised things would improve when his current project ended. I started trying harder. I planned surprise date nights, bought new lingerie, sent flirty texts during the day. Most of my efforts were met with lukewarm responses or rescheduling. Still, I made excuses for him. Maybe it was a midlife crisis at 35. Perhaps he was dealing with depression or anxiety. He wasn't ready to discuss. I never seriously considered the most obvious explanation. As our 8th anniversary approached, I became determined to reconnect. This milestone deserved celebration, and I hoped a special evening might help us rediscover what we'd lost. I spent weeks planning the perfect anniversary surprise, convinced that with enough effort, I could save what was slipping through my fingers. I wanted our 8th anniversary to be absolutely perfect. After months of feeling disconnected from James, this was my opportunity to reignite that spark between us. La Maison was the obvious choice for our celebration since it was where James had taken me on our first official date. Back then, we could barely afford it and had saved for weeks. Now, I could easily reserve their exclusive private dining room. When I called to make the reservation, Marie, the events coordinator, recognized our names immediately. Mrs. Wilson, of course we'd be honored to host your anniversary. The Orchid Room is available that Friday. It has a beautiful view of the garden and complete privacy. I requested their special 8-course tasting menu and selected wines to pair with each course. The chef agreed to recreate the chocolate souffle that James had ordered for us to share on that first date. Every detail mattered. Next, I carefully selected who to invite. I wanted people who had been important throughout our relationship. James's brother Michael and his wife, my college roommate Stephanie, our couple friends Ryan and Lisa, who we'd known since our early New York days, and a few others. 15 people total, all sworn to secrecy to maintain the surprise. He has no idea we're all going to be there, I told Stephanie over coffee. He thinks it's just going to be the two of us for dinner. That's so romantic, Amanda, she replied, though I noticed she didn't quite meet my eyes. At the time, I attributed her awkwardness to her recent breakup. Shopping for the perfect outfit became my obsession. I finally found a red dress that made me feel beautiful again. It had been a while since I had dressed up for James, and I hoped the colour would remind him of a red dress I'd worn early in our dating days that he'd loved. I scheduled a hair appointment manicure and even splurged on a makeup artist to come to our apartment. The most meaningful part of my preparations was creating a custom gift for James. I spent weeks gathering photos from our 8 years together, writing little notes about my favourite memories and assembling them into a handcrafted leather-bound book. The first page had our wedding photo with the inscription, "To 8 beautiful years and many more to come." The irony of those words still stings. The day of our anniversary, butterflies danced in my stomach as I got ready. The makeup artist applied the finishing touches while I sipped champagne trying to calm my nerves. "You look stunning," she said, as I stood in front of the mirror in the red dress, my hair cascading in soft waves down my back. I texted James one final confirmation. "Can't wait to see you at La Maison tonight at 7:30. Don't be late." His response came 20 minutes later. "Looking forward to it. Might be a few minutes late. Wrapping up something important at work." Even that mild delay didn't dampen my spirits. I was determined that tonight would be perfect. I took a car service to the restaurant, arriving at 7 to make sure everything was ready. The Orchid Room looked magical with soft lighting, elegant floral arrangements, and a table beautifully set for our guests. Marie approached me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everything is prepared exactly as you requested, Mrs. Wilson. Your guests should be arriving soon." I thanked her and checked my phone. No new messages from James. I told myself not to worry. Tonight was going to change everything. I just knew it. I arrived at La Maison an hour early to make sure everything was perfect. The orchid room looked even more beautiful than I had imagined, with twinkling lights and white orchids everywhere. Our friends started arriving, each giving me tight hugs and compliments on my appearance. There was an undercurrent of tension I couldn't quite place, but I attributed it to the excitement of surprising James. 7:30 came and went with no sign of my husband. I wasn't concerned yet, since James was habitually late to everything. By 8, I sent him a text. "Where are you?" Dinner reservations were for 7:30. His response finally came at 8:15. "On my way! Bringing a special guest. Hope that's okay." I frowned at my phone. A special guest. Who would he bring to our anniversary dinner? Maybe his mother had come to town as a surprise, or perhaps a colleague from out of town that he couldn't avoid entertaining. It was annoying that he hadn't consulted me, but I decided to roll with it, rather than letting it ruin our evening. "Everyone," I announced to our gathered friends, "James is on his way, and apparently bringing someone with him. Let's all be ready to surprise him when he walks in." As we waited, I overheard 2 waiters talking just outside the door. "The proposal setup is all ready in the rose room," one said. "The gentleman requested rose petals and champagne for when he pops the question." My heart skipped a beat. For a brief, beautiful moment, I thought James might have planned his own surprise. Maybe he was renewing our vows or had purchased the ring upgrade we'd discussed years ago, but never prioritized. The thought brought tears to my eyes, and I quickly excused myself to the ladies' room to touch up my makeup. When I returned, I noticed my friends huddled together looking at someone's phone. They quickly disbanded when they saw me plastering unconvincing smiles on their faces. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Absolutely," Lisa said too brightly. "Just showing everyone pictures of our new puppy." Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes, and Stephanie suddenly became very interested in her water glass. Even James's brother Michael seemed uncomfortable, repeatedly checking his watch and exchanging glances with his wife. My phone rang. It was my mother calling to wish us a happy anniversary. I stepped out into the hallway to take the call, grateful for the distraction from the increasingly strange vibe in the room. "Are you having a wonderful time, darling?" Mum asked. "James isn't here yet, but everything looks beautiful," I replied, not wanting to share my growing unease. "He's running late as usual." "Well, you know James," she said with forced cheerfulness, "always making an entrance." After promising to call her tomorrow with all the details, I ended the call and took a moment to collect myself in the quiet hallway. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed my dress and prepared to return to the orchid room. That's when I heard it. James's distinctive laugh coming from another private dining room down the hall. The rose room where the waiter had mentioned a proposal was being set up. Surely it was a coincidence. James wouldn't be in a different room. He must be just arriving and talking to the staff. Yet my feet carried me toward the sound before my brain could process what was happening. The door to the rose room was slightly ajar, and through the crack I could see part of the room decorated with rose petals and candles. It looked like a scene from a romantic movie, but it wasn't our room and it wasn't meant for me. I should have turned around and gone back to our guests. Instead, I pushed the door open just a little more so I could see inside. And there was my husband, looking more handsome and happier than I had seen him in months, standing next to a beautiful young woman with long blonde hair. The scene before me froze time itself. James stood in the centre of the rose room, a nervous but excited smile on his face. He was wearing his best charcoal grey suit, the one I had bought him for Christmas last year. His normally tousled hair was perfectly styled, and he'd even gotten a fresh haircut. He looked more put together than he had for our dinner date last month. The woman beside him was breathtaking, in her mid-20s with cascading blonde hair, wearing a form-fitting blue dress that showcased her perfect figure. She was looking at James with absolute adoration. I recognized her from the Prescott Financial Holiday Party last December. James had introduced her briefly as Natalie, my new executive assistant, before quickly moving on to talk to someone else. I remembered thinking she seemed too young and too beautiful to be just an assistant, but I had pushed that thought away as unworthy jealousy. The room was filled with about 20 people, some I recognized as James's co-workers. They were all holding champagne flutes, watching expectantly as James cleared his throat. I stood frozen in the doorway, partly hidden by the door itself. No one had noticed me yet. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," James began, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "This moment has been a long time coming." The crowd murmured appreciatively, and someone called out, "About time." James took Natalie's hand in his, gazing into her eyes. "Natalie, from the first day you walked into my office, I knew you were special. Over the past year, you've become not just my assistant, but my confidant, my best friend, and the love of my life." Each word struck me like a physical blow. A year. He'd been seeing her for a year while I was at home supporting him, making excuses for his late nights, and planning our anniversary. "You understand me in a way no one else ever has," James continued. "You see me for who I truly am and love me anyway. You've made me happier than I ever thought possible." The room collectively sighed. Natalie had tears streaming down her face, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth in anticipation. And then James dropped to one knee, still holding her hand. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a stunning diamond ring that caught the light and sparkled brilliantly. It was at least twice the size of the one on my finger. "Natalie Elizabeth Parker, I can't imagine my life without you. Will you make me the happiest man alive and marry me?" The crowd erupted in cheers and applause as Natalie nodded frantically, unable to speak through her tears of joy. "Yes, yes, of course I will." She finally managed, her voice breaking with emotion. James slid the ring onto her finger, stood, and pulled her into a passionate kiss. Their guests clinked glasses and continued cheering, some taking photos of the happy couple. "To James and Natalie," someone called out, raising their glass. That's when I stepped fully into the room, unable to remain hidden any longer. A woman near the door noticed me first, her expression shifting from joy to confusion, like a ripple effect. The room gradually fell silent section by section until only James and Natalie remained oblivious, still embraced in their kiss. When they finally broke apart, James turned to accept congratulations and froze, his face flushed with happiness, moments before drained of all colour as he saw me standing there. The velvet box fell from his hand, hitting the floor with a soft thud that echoed in the now silent room. "Amanda," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Natalie looked between us, confusion evident on her face. "James, who is this?" James couldn't seem to form words, his mouth opening and closing without sound. A man near him, who I recognized as his colleague David, leaned over and whispered something in Natalie's ear. Her eyes widened in horror as she looked back at me. You're his wife," she stammered instinctively, covering the new ring with her other hand. The room had gone so quiet. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Everyone was watching, frozen in place like some terrible tableau. I felt their eyes on me, felt their second-hand embarrassment and morbid curiosity. This would be office gossip for years to come. I stood there still clutching my handbag, wearing the red dress I'd chosen so carefully to impress a husband who had just proposed to another woman on our anniversary. The absolute absurdity of the situation hit me, and I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh, but something broken and terrible that seemed to come from someone else entirely. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by my uncontrollable laughter that was quickly turning to sobs. James finally snapped out of his frozen state and rushed toward me, panic written all over his face. "Amanda, I can explain," he said, reaching for my arm. His voice was desperate, his eyes darting around the room as everyone watched our private nightmare unfold in public. I jerked away from his touch as if burned. "Explain what, James, how you've been cheating on me, or how you plan to propose to your mistress on our 8th wedding anniversary. Please enlighten me." Natalie stood rooted to the spot, the enormous diamond on her finger catching the light. "James told me he was separated," she whispered, her voice carrying in the silent room. "He said the divorce was almost finalized." Fresh pain cut through me as I realized the depth of his deception. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had created an entire fictional life to seduce this young woman. "Well, he lied to you too," I said to her, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "We're very much married. Tonight is our wedding anniversary." Gasps echoed around the room. Someone muttered, "Jesus Christ, James." I watched as the reality of the situation dawned on Natalie's face, her expression morphing from confusion to horror. James stepped between us, his back to Natalie as he faced me. "Amanda, please. Let's talk about this privately." "Now you want privacy?" I gestured around the room. "You didn't seem concerned about privacy when you were declaring your love for your assistant in front of all your colleagues." From the back of the room, someone called out, "Is this some kind of joke?" Others began whispering among themselves, unsure whether to leave or stay for the unfolding drama. "Everyone out!" James suddenly shouted, turning to the crowd. "Please give us some space." People began awkwardly filing out some mumbling apologies as they passed me. Natalie stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, looking utterly devastated. I felt a strange pang of empathy for her. She was a victim in this too, albeit in a different way. As the last guest left closing the door behind them, the three of us remained in a triangle of betrayal. I could hear the hushed voices outside, some people lingering to eavesdrop. "How long?" I demanded, looking directly at James. He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit I once found endearing. "Amanda, this isn't what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like you're proposing to another woman on our anniversary. How long, James?" 14 months, Natalie answered when James remained silent. She had removed the ring and was clutching it in her palm. "We met when I started working at Prescott last September. 14 months. While I was supporting him, loving him, making excuses for him, he had been building a relationship with someone else. All those late nights, cancelled plans, the declining intimacy. It all made horrible sense now. Did everyone know?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Your colleagues, our friends." James looked at the floor. His silence was answer enough. "I think I'm going to be sick," Natalie said, suddenly rushing past me and out the door. Alone with James, I felt a surge of anger unlike anything I'd ever experienced. "Our friends are waiting in the orchid room," I said coldly. "I planned a surprise anniversary party for you. 15 of our closest friends and family are sitting there right now, probably wondering where we are." James paled even further, if that was possible. "Michael is here. Yes, your brother is here. So is Stephanie, Ryan, Lisa." I listed off names, watching his face fall with each one. Did they all know, too? Was I the only one in the dark? "Not everyone," he said quietly, "but some suspected." The betrayal cut deeper. Not only had my husband been unfaithful, but some of our friends had chosen to protect his secret rather than tell me the truth. "I need to leave," I said suddenly, unable to bear another moment in his presence. "I can't even look at you right now." "Amanda, please," James pleaded, grabbing my wrist. "Let me fix this. We can work through this. I yanked my arm free. Fix this. You proposed to another woman on our anniversary. There is no fixing this, James. As I turned to leave, I stopped at the door and looked back at him, standing alone amid the rose petals and champagne meant for his proposal. I'll be staying at the Waldorf tonight. Don't try to contact me, my lawyer will be in touch. I walked out with my head held high, though inside I was shattered. In the hallway, I could hear raised voices coming from the orchid room. Someone must have told our guests what happened. I couldn't face them, not now. Instead, I slipped out a side exit and stepped into the cool night air. Only when I was safely in a taxi did I allow myself to break down completely sobbing as the city lights blurred through my tears. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages and calls from friends, but I couldn't bear to look at them. Who had known? Who had kept his secret? I directed the driver to take me to the Waldorf Astoria, a place James and I had stayed for our first anniversary. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. I would spend this anniversary alone in the same hotel where we had once been so happy, contemplating the end of my marriage. That night, alone in a luxurious hotel room I could barely afford, I cycled through shock, grief, rage, and heartbreak. Around 3 a.m, I finally called the one person I knew I could trust, implicitly, my older sister Catherine, who lived in Boston. "Cat," I sobbed when she answered. "Everything is falling apart." The morning after the disastrous anniversary, I woke up in the Waldorf with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. My phone showed 47 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Most were from James, growing increasingly desperate through the night. "Amanda, please call me. I'm so sorry. This is all a huge mistake. Let me explain. It's not what you think. I'm worried about you. Just let me know you're safe. I love you. We can work through this." The last one, time-stamped 4:32 a.m, made me physically ill. After throwing up in the elegant marble bathroom, I sat on the cold floor and began sorting through the other messages. Stephanie had texted several times. "Amanda, I'm so sorry. Call me when you can." I should have told you. I wanted to so many times. So she had known. My best friend since college had watched me plan this anniversary dinner, knowing my husband was having an affair. I deleted her number on the spot. Messages from Ryan and Lisa expressed shock and concern, claiming they had no idea. James's brother Michael texted that he was blindsided and disgusted with James offering his support. At least some people seemed genuinely surprised. By 9 a.m, I had pulled myself together enough to make 2 important calls. The first was to Jeffrey Goldman, supposedly one of the best divorce attorneys in Manhattan. Catherine's friend had used him for her high-profile divorce last year and recommended him highly. His receptionist, hearing the urgency in my voice, squeezed me in for an 11 o'clock appointment. The second call was to my boss at Athena Group. "Diane, I'm sorry for the short notice, but I need to take a few personal days," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, Amanda. Take whatever time you need," she replied. "The Rivera campaign can wait until next week." I didn't offer details, but something in my voice must have conveyed the severity of the situation because she added, "If you need anything at all, please let me know. The company has resources that might help." The meeting with Jeffrey Goldman was a wake-up call in more ways than one. His office occupied half a floor in a midtown skyscraper with views of Central Park. The consultation fee alone was more than I typically spent on a week's worth of groceries. "Mrs. Wilson, I understand you've had quite a shock," he said after I recounted the previous night's events. His composed demeanour was exactly what I needed. "Before we discuss strategy, I need to ask, are you certain you want to pursue divorce? Some couples do recover from infidelity." "He proposed to another woman on our anniversary," I replied flatly. "I'm certain." Goldman nodded and began explaining the process ahead. New York was a no-fault divorce state. but James's infidelity could potentially impact financial settlements if we could prove he had spent marital assets on Natalie. "What's your financial situation?" he asked. "Joint accounts, investments, property." As I began detailing our finances, Goldman's expression grew increasingly concerned. "Mrs. Wilson, when was the last time you reviewed your joint investment accounts?" "Maybe 6 months ago. James handles most of our investments. He's the financial expert." Goldman typed something into his computer and turned the screen toward me. "This is a database that tracks large financial transactions. Your husband has withdrawn significant amounts from your joint investment accounts over the past year." I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. Nearly $200,000 had been moved out of our joint accounts, in increments, just small enough not to trigger automatic notifications. "He's been hiding money," I whispered, feeling a new wave of betrayal. "Where did it go?" "That's what we need to find out," Goldman replied, turning the screen back. "I recommend we hire a forensic accountant immediately. In the meantime, you need to secure what assets you can." By the time I left his office, I had a to-do list that made my head spin. Open new bank accounts in my name, only move half our joint checking and savings, immediately collect and copy all financial records, change passwords on my personal accounts, and begin documenting everything I could remember about James's schedule over the past year. "Don't confront him yet," Goldman advised as I was leaving. "The element of surprise is our advantage. Gather as much evidence as you can. We'll serve him when we're ready." The next few days passed in a blur. I checked out of the Waldorf and into a much more affordable hotel under my maiden name. I told only Catherine and my parents where I was staying. My mother wanted to fly in from Chicago immediately, but I convinced her to wait. I needed space to think. James continued his barrage of calls and texts, alternating between apologies, explanations, and accusations that I was overreacting. I responded only once, telling him I was safe and needed time. Then I blocked his number. Working remotely from my hotel room, I began the painstaking process of untangling our finances. What I discovered made me physically sick. Beyond the money he'd been hiding, James had opened credit cards in his name only and charged expensive gifts, hotel stays and restaurants clearly meant for Natalie. He had been using our joint funds to finance his affair, while I cut back on personal expenses to boost our savings. Through careful documentation and some social media stalking, I discovered James had taken Natalie to Paris for a weekend 3 months ago, a trip he had told me was a financial conference in Chicago. There were charges for jewelry stores, high-end restaurants, and boutique hotels throughout the past year, all while I was shopping sales and using coupons to save for our future. The more I discovered, the more my heartbreak transformed into cold, calculated anger. This was more than an affair. This was systematic deception and financial betrayal. A week after the proposal disaster, I met again with Goldman, this time bringing folders of evidence I had collected. His forensic accountant had traced some of the missing money to a separate account James had opened in his name only. The rest was still unaccounted for. "You've done excellent work," Goldman said, reviewing my documentation. "We have more than enough to file. The question is, when do you want to serve him?" I had given this considerable thought over the sleepless nights in my hotel room. "I want to confront him in person," I said. "Not just hand him papers through a process server. I want to see his face when he realizes I know everything." Goldman looked concerned. "That's unusual. Most clients prefer to keep their distance." "This is important to me," I insisted. "I need closure." After some discussion, we agreed on a plan. I would set up a meeting with James ostensibly to discuss reconciliation. Goldman would prepare all the divorce papers, and his assistant would accompany me as a witness, but remain outside until needed. 1 month, I told Goldman. "I want 1 month to gather more evidence and prepare myself. Then I'll be ready to end this for good." For the next month, I transformed my pain into purpose. Every tear I shed fueled my determination to take control of the situation. I moved out of the hotel and into a furnished monthly rental in Brooklyn, far from our Manhattan apartment. I told my boss at Athena Group an abbreviated version of what had happened, and she was surprisingly supportive, allowing me flexible hours as I rebuilt my life. During this time, I maintained minimal contact with James. I sent brief, non-committal responses to his increasingly desperate messages, giving him just enough hope to keep him from taking drastic action. "I need space to think," became my mantra. "We'll talk when I'm ready." Meanwhile, I was methodically building my case with Goldman's guidance. The forensic accountant continued tracking James's financial movements, documenting every misappropriated dollar. I discovered James had not only been funneling money to a secret account, but had made a down payment on a condo in Natalie's name 3 months earlier. The betrayal ran deeper than I could have imagined. I also hired a private investigator who documented James's ongoing relationship with Natalie despite the disastrous proposal. Apparently, she had forgiven him after he claimed I was mentally unstable and had misunderstood their relationship. The PI provided photos of them entering her apartment building together, dining at expensive restaurants, and even shopping for furniture. All while, James was sending me messages, claiming he wanted to save our marriage. Goldman's team assembled a comprehensive dossier of James's infidelity and financial deceptions. New York might be a no-fault divorce state, but judges still considered marital misconduct when dividing assets, especially when one spouse had dissipated marital funds on an extramarital affair. "You have an exceptionally strong case," Goldman assured me during our final strategy meeting. "Given the evidence of his financial misconduct, we have grounds to request more than 50% of the marital assets, plus attorney's fees." Beyond the legal preparations, I focused on my personal transformation. I joined a support group for people going through divorce, started therapy sessions, and reconnected with friends who had no connection to James. I began running every morning, finding that physical exertion helped clear my mind and release some of the anger that threatened to consume me. I also reconnected with those friends who had been truly blindsided by James's betrayal. His brother Michael became an unexpected ally, furious at James's behavior and offering to testify about conversations where James had mentioned investing in property I knew nothing about. As the weeks passed, my emotional state evolved from devastated to determined. The woman who had collapsed sobbing in a taxi was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who refused to be a victim. On the day before our scheduled confrontation, I visited a high-end salon for a complete makeover. I had my hair cut into a sophisticated bob, coloured a richer shade of brown, and treated myself to a professional makeup session. I bought a new outfit as well, a sleek navy blue pantsuit that conveyed confidence and power. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognised myself. Gone was the woman who had tried so hard to please an undeserving husband. The person staring back at me was poised, confident, and ready to reclaim her life. That evening, I texted James, "I'm ready to talk. Meet me at La Maison tomorrow at noon. Private room." His response came immediately. "Thank God, I'll be there. I love you so much." I didn't bother responding. Those words meant nothing coming from him. Goldman had arranged for us to use the same restaurant as a psychological power move. The management, mortified by what had happened at the infamous proposal, had agreed to give us the Rose Room at a discount. The very same room where I had watched my marriage implode would now be where I took back my power. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. My anxiety had been replaced with clarity and purpose. I knew exactly what I needed to do, and for the first time since that horrible night, I felt in control of my own story. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my new pantsuit, applied my makeup with precision, and met Goldman at his office to review our strategy one final time. The divorce papers were prepared, organised in a leather portfolio, along with copies of all the evidence we had gathered. "Remember, stay calm and stick to the facts," Goldman advised as we travelled to the restaurant. "Don't let him provoke an emotional response." I nodded, feeling surprisingly serene. "I won't. Today isn't about emotion, it's about justice." Goldman's assistant, Rachel, would be accompanying us as a witness, but would wait outside until we were ready for her. The forensic accountant, David Levine, would join us in the meeting to address any financial questions that might arise. As our car pulled up to La Maison, I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. "I'm ready," I said, more to myself than to my companions. Through the restaurant windows, I could see James already waiting inside, nervously checking his watch. He had also gotten a haircut and was wearing a suit I had bought him last Christmas. The sight of him no longer caused pain. Instead, I felt a cool detachment, like I was observing a stranger. "Let's do this," I said, stepping out of the car and toward the final chapter of my marriage. The maitre d' recognized me immediately as I entered La Maison, his eyes widening slightly. Word of the proposal disaster had clearly circulated among the staff. He gave me a respectful nod and led our group toward the rose room without being asked. "Mr. Wilson is already waiting," he informed me quietly. "Shall I announce you?" "No," I replied. "I'd prefer to enter unannounced." He nodded and stepped aside, allowing me to approach the partly open door. Through the gap, I could see James sitting at a table for two, nervously arranging the silverware. He had ordered a bottle of champagne, and a bouquet of roses sat in the centre of the table. My stomach turned at his presumption. I took a final, deep breath and pushed the door fully open. James looked up, his rehearsed smile freezing as he took in not just me but Goldman and the forensic accountant behind me. His eyes darted between us, confusion replacing his initial happiness. "Amanda," he said, standing quickly. "I thought we were meeting alone. Who are these people?" I walked calmly to the table but remained standing. "James, this is Jeffrey Goldman, my attorney, and David Levine, a forensic accountant." The colour drained from James's face as the implications sank in. "Attorney Amanda, we don't need lawyers. We can work this out between us. Please sit down," I said, taking a seat myself. Goldman and Levine sat on either side of me, creating a united front across from James. James reluctantly lowered himself back into his chair, his eyes never leaving my face. "You look different," he said, clearly trying to redirect the conversation. "I am different," I replied simply. "A lot has changed in the past month." "Amanda, please, just hear me out before you do anything rash," James pleaded, reaching across the table for my hand. I pulled back before he could touch me. "I've given you plenty of time to explain, James. You've sent hundreds of messages, each one a different version of the same lies. I'm not here to listen to more excuses." Goldman placed the leather portfolio on the table and opened it, revealing the stack of documents inside. "Mr. Wilson, my client has instructed me to proceed with divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences." James's face hardened. "So that's it. You're not even willing to try one mistake and you throw away 8 years of marriage." My calm nearly broke at his audacity, but I maintained my composure. "One mistake is that what you call 14 months of deception, proposing to another woman, hiding money and buying her a condo with our joint funds." James paled. "What are you talking about? I never bought anyone a condo." Levine spoke up, sliding a document across the table. $370,000 was withdrawn from your joint investment accounts over the past 14 months. $87,000 of that was used as a down payment on a condominium at 323 West 84th Street, purchased in the name of Natalie Parker. James stared at the document, then at me, his expression shifting from shock to anger. "You've been investigating me." "Yes," I said simply, "and we found everything, James. The secret account at First Republic Bank, the credit cards in your name only, the weekend in Paris that was supposedly a conference in Chicago, the jewelry, The dinners, the hotels, all of it. I pulled out my phone and showed him photos the private investigator had taken just days earlier, James and Natalie furniture shopping, having dinner, entering her building late at night. All while you were sending me messages about wanting to save our marriage, I added coldly. James's demeanour changed completely. The apologetic husband disappeared, replaced by someone calculating and defensive. You had me followed. That's insane, Amanda. You've completely overreacted to this entire situation. Actually, Goldman interjected, Mrs. Wilson's response has been remarkably measured given the circumstances. We have documented evidence of your adultery and financial misconduct, including misappropriation of marital assets and attempts to hide community property. James's eyes narrowed. So that's your play? Try to take me for everything because I fell in love with someone else. You think any judge will care that I had an affair? They'll care that you spent nearly $400,000 of marital funds on your mistress, I replied evenly. They'll care that you made major financial decisions without my knowledge or consent. They'll care that you attempted to hide assets during the dissolution of marriage. Goldman slid a document across the table. This is our proposed settlement agreement. Given the extent of your misconduct, Mrs. Wilson is entitled to significantly more than half of the marital assets. However, she is willing to settle for a 60-40 split in her favour, plus compensation for legal fees and the cost of the forensic accounting, provided you agree to the terms without contest. James didn't even look at the document. His face had turned an angry red. This is extortion. You're trying to punish me financially because I don't love you anymore. The words were meant to hurt me, but I felt nothing. The man across from me was a stranger, someone I no longer recognized or cared about. This isn't about punishment, James. It's about fairness. You spent our money on another woman while lying to my face. You betrayed not just our marriage vows, but our financial partnership. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. You have two options. Sign the agreement now, or we take this to court, where I will request full financial disclosure, subpoena, your work emails, depose your colleagues and friends, and make every detail of your affair public record. Your choice. James looked from me to Goldman to Levine, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. He was trapped and he knew it. I need to review this with my own lawyer, he said, finally, his voice tight with suppressed rage. Goldman nodded. Of course. You have 48 hours. After that, we file with the court. I stood up, signalling the end of the meeting. One last thing, James. I've returned to my maiden name personally and professionally. The papers reflect that change. As I turned to leave, James called after me. Was any of it real for you, Amanda, or was I just a stepping stone for your career? I paused at the door and looked back at him, this man I had once loved with my whole heart. I loved you completely, James. I was loyal, supportive, and honest for 8 years. I just finally realized I deserve someone who will do the same for me. With that, I walked out, head held high, Goldman and Levine following behind me. In the lobby, the restaurant staff who had witnessed my humiliation a month earlier now watched with something like respect in their eyes as I passed. Outside in the bright sunshine, I took a deep breath of fresh air. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly free. The weight of betrayal and uncertainty had lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose and self-respect I hadn't felt in years. You did exceptionally well, Goldman said, genuine admiration in his voice. Most clients don't maintain that level of composure. What happens now? I asked, as we walked toward the waiting car. He'll consult an attorney who will tell him he's in a terrible position. The smart move is to take the settlement offer. If he doesn't, we proceed to court, where he'll likely fare worse. I nodded, processing this information. And after that? Goldman smiled slightly. After that, you begin again, but this time on your own terms. As the car pulled away from La Maison, I didn't look back. That chapter of my life was closing, and ahead lay possibilities I was finally ready to embrace. It's been 2 years since that day at La Maison when I reclaimed my life. James did eventually sign the settlement agreement after his own attorney advised him it was his best option. The divorce was finalised 6 months later, and just like that, 8 years of marriage was legally dissolved. The aftermath wasn't always easy. There were days when grief would hit me unexpectedly, not for the man James turned out to be, but for the future I had planned and the dreams that died with our marriage. There were nights I questioned every moment of our relationship, wondering if any of it had been real. Therapy helped me work through these feelings and understand that my marriage wasn't a complete failure just because it ended. I learned that healing isn't linear. Some days I felt strong and empowered, ready to take on the world. Other days, something small would trigger a memory, and I'd find myself in tears. But each time the recovery came faster, the pain less intense. The first few months were about survival. I moved into a small but sunny apartment in Brooklyn, far from our old neighborhood. I threw myself into work, taking on challenging projects that required all my focus and creativity. The distraction was therapeutic, and my career flourished as a result. 6 months after the divorce, I was promoted to Executive Director of Marketing at Athena Group with a significant salary increase and my own office overlooking the city. Financially, I rebuilt from scratch. The settlement provided a solid foundation, but I educated myself about investments and financial planning, determined never to be financially vulnerable again. I worked with a financial advisor who taught me everything James should have shared with me during our marriage. Today, my portfolio is diversified and growing steadily, and I make all decisions about my money with complete confidence. Friends and family were crucial to my recovery. Catherine visited frequently sometimes, just sitting with me during the hardest days. My parents, though, devastated by what happened, showed unwavering support, and I discovered who my true friends were. Some disappeared uncomfortable with the messiness of my situation or loyal to James. Others stepped up in ways I never expected, bringing meals, offering shoulders to cry on, or simply providing distraction when I needed it most. I also made new friends through a divorce support group, women and men who understood exactly what I was experiencing because they'd lived it too. We formed a tight-knit circle, celebrating each other's victories and providing comfort during setbacks. Some of those relationships have evolved into my closest friendships. As for James and Natalie, I heard through mutual acquaintances that they stayed together. He never went through with another proposal, at least not publicly. According to office gossip, their relationship lost its luster once it was no longer forbidden. Last I heard, James was transferred to Prescott's Chicago office, whether by choice or consequence, I don't know. I stopped keeping tabs on him after the first year. His life is no longer my concern. Dating again was terrifying at first. The thought of being vulnerable with someone new seemed impossible after such betrayal. I took my time enjoying my independence and rediscovering who I was outside of marriage. When I finally felt ready to date about a year after the divorce, I approached it with clear boundaries and a much stronger sense of what I deserved. There have been a few relationships since then, some brief, others more significant. I'm currently seeing someone who understands my history and respects my independence. We're taking things slowly, building trust day by day. Whether it leads to forever or not, I'm enjoying the journey without placing expectations on the outcome. The most profound change has been in how I view myself. For too long, I defined my worth through James's eyes, seeking his approval and validation. Now I recognize my own value. I've learned to trust my instincts, set healthy boundaries, and walk away from situations that don't serve me. I no longer make myself smaller to accommodate someone else's ego or ignore red flags in the name of love. If there's one thing I could tell anyone going through similar betrayal, it's this: what happened to you is not a reflection of your worth. Someone else's inability to be faithful and honest says everything about their character and nothing about yours. You deserve someone who chooses you every day, someone whose actions match their words. The pain you feel now will not last forever. Each day you survive brings you closer to healing, even when it doesn't feel that way. Be gentle with yourself during this process. Seek support from professionals and loved ones. Allow yourself to grieve what you've lost, but don't lose sight of all you still have and all you can become. Looking back at that horrible night when I walked in on James proposing to Natalie, I can now see it as the moment that set me free. Yes, it was painful beyond words, but it was also the wake-up call I needed. Sometimes the most devastating moments lead to the most profound growth. Today, I'm happier than I ever thought possible. My life looks nothing like I imagined it would, but it's authentically mine. I've built a career I'm proud of, surrounded myself with people who truly value me, and created a home that reflects my personality and brings me peace. Most importantly, I've learned that my happiness cannot depend on another person. It must come from within. That knowledge is something no one can ever take from me, and it's the most valuable lesson from this entire experience. If my story resonates with you, please share your own experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? What helped you heal? Drop a like. If this story gave you strength, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity, and share with someone who might need to hear that there's light waiting on the other side of darkness. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to rise after falling.